Welcome to part 1 of converting a Master Replicas 2006 Darth Maul lightsaber. We're going to be doing a basic conversion, keeping in place the stock battery pack and circuit board while upgrading the LED and moving to a detachable blade. A shout out to the Custom Saber Shop who provided the tutorial and pictures that are used for this video. This is part 1, Disassembly of the lightsaber.
Before we get too far into the disassembly, let's take a look at some of the parts you're going to need to do the conversion. On the far right hand side we have our new metal blade holder or conversion kit, along with a copper heatsink that will screw into the bottom of that blade holder. Moving to the left we have our new LED, a single red Cree in this case, along with a resistor to help match the voltage coming from the battery pack with the voltage of the LED light, and finally some thermal tape that will attach the LED to the heatsink. Continuing to move to the left we have a lens and lens holder, and finally on the far left we have a new blade plug which will help protect people's eyes when the blade is not inserted if the LED gets turned on. So this is what we're going to use when we get to the assembly video a little bit later.
So we're going to start our disassembly by first unscrewing the pommel and removing the battery pack. Okay? And we will set that aside for later. The next thing that we have to do is we have to take a small pin out of the on-off switch. Okay? So you just barely see it there. Maybe we can zoom in a little closer to show you what we mean. Alright, that gets us a much closer view of it. You can see right in the center there is a very small pin. So what I've got is a very fine nail punch that I'm going to put right on that pin. And I'm going to take my hammer and we're going to give it a number of taps to push it all the way through. Alright, a few good whacks and it will actually push through. If you don't have a nail punch that's fine enough, you may be able to do it with something like a small finishing nail. Okay, so something like that may also push it through. Basically your goal is to push it through enough so that you can take that orange knob and with a couple of good twists that orange power knob will actually come off. That's our goal here. Once we have that off, you can see that there's actually a small metal ring around it here, close to. So I'm going to attempt to remove that as well. So I need that actually removed. And then the pin itself, it's still actually in there. And I am going to need the pin later to reuse that. So I'm still going to use that same nail and give it a couple of whacks. Push it all the way through, and eventually it's going to fall right out. Okay? You want to keep all of this stuff together. Personally, I'm a big fan of baggies. Keep everything together and it keeps things separately, so I'm going to throw the pin, the ring, and the cap all in one and set that aside for the moment. Alright, we're still not done with that area of the switch. We still need to keep removing the items around it, so we're going to remove this black part here. There's actually a small Phillips screwdriver inside of it, so I'm just going to grab out of my set of repair screwdrivers a Phillips head screw, and we are going to unscrew that. And so the screw and the black spacer will come out along with a small little metal spacer inside, and that stuff is also going to go into that same little baggie so I don't lose anything for later. Next up is I actually have next to it I have a knurled aluminum knob, and that actually simply unscrews, so that can be done by hand, and I unscrew that along with the metal washer that comes with that, and into the same baggie it goes. Finally, I'm going to flip it over to the other side, and you can see I've got the Covertech wheel here that attaches to the Covertech holder on the belt, And again, a Phillips screwdriver, simply going to put that in there, and we will unscrew that Covertech knob, and it can also go into that same baggie. So I've got everything kind of related to that area of the hilt together in one bag for later. So we removed all of that, and we removed the Covertech. Alright, the next thing we're going to work at is getting the blade assembly out of the hilt, and the first thing I have to do is I have to deal with this pin that goes all the way through the body crosswise and holds it in place. Okay, so in order to do that, I can just take a punch. I'm going to use a larger one than I used for the power. This one's a little bigger pin, and I'm going to work on it from the side that's opposite the side that actually has the has what looks like little lights on it. I'm going to punch it through from here. So put my nail punch onto there, steady that out, give it a couple of good whacks. Remember that the pin actually goes all the way through. You can see it actually starting to come out on that side, so make sure that you're protecting it on that side. And so this side here that's closest to the light actually has a little bit of knurling on it. And so what that allows me to do is very, very carefully with a hammer, I can sometimes get my claw in there and pull it the rest of the way out. Gives it something to actually grip on and pull out. Okay, so that will come out, and that's the first step in being able to remove the entire assembly from the hilt. Once the pin is out, the top of the emitter here actually unscrews, so I can actually take that and I can unscrew that, basically unscrew the rest of the hilt from the top part of the emitter. Okay, and that will actually just slide off the end of the blade. This is actually connected into there, so with a little bit of twisting and pressure, it'll come out, and the quick connect will actually come out with it. So you can see there it has disconnected from the rest of it. You don't have to do it that way. There's a piece we're going to remove on this end to get the rest of it out, and you could actually just slide the whole thing, blade and all, through the end here if you wish. You don't have to take the step that I just took. Alright, so now let's get at the piece. There's a black ring in here holding everything else in place that we're going to attempt to remove. Alright, to get this piece out that's actually in here, it's actually partially glued to the metal inside wall of the hilt. So one of the things that I did was I actually took a small flat screwdriver, a little bit bigger than the repair ones that I've got here, but not too big, and basically took the opportunity to jam it down inside, in between the wall, kind of finding an opening and working it in there, and then basically just working it around a bit by bit. Basically you're just loosening it from the wall to make sure it's there. This thing doesn't get reused, so if you're damaging it, basically it doesn't matter, but it is glued in there tight. This is probably the hardest part of the whole disassembly. So for those of you who have ever done a Darth Vader one and fought with that pin on the clamp, this is your equivalent here on the Darth Maul, is essentially fighting to get that thing out. So it's going to take a bit of working it around. You're going to be bending and damaging it. Don't go too deep. You don't want to hit the part that eventually holds the circuit board. But basically, if you work it and pry it away from the wall, eventually that thing will bend and it will pull out. And you may need a pair of needle nose pliers. May be very, very helpful here to reach in at some point when it's all separated from the wall and just yank it out. Okay, so there we go. We've gotten it out. You can see I made a right fine mess of it. Pretty damaged up because it was glued in there good, but basically able to pry it out and then yank it all the way around. At that point, it's easy enough just to tap a little bit to loosen it up. I've got a long screwdriver that I can also use just to give a little bit of pressure in here, not a lot. Make sure that you don't hit, if you're sticking something in there, don't hit the quick connect that's actually in there, but a little bit of tapping in there, and the rest of the hilt will come out the bottom end. That's one of the reasons why some people may wish to actually keep the whole assembly in place rather than pulling out the top as I did, that they can use the blade to push it through and then draw it all the way through. I just found that a bit more awkward because of having to fuss with this thing to get that first ring out. It didn't like banging the blade, but your choice. The advantage of leaving the blade in is you don't risk damaging any of the quick connect connections at this point. Alright, so we're going to set the hilt aside for the moment. We're done with that for right now. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is we're going to, if you haven't already separated the blade from the circuit board, we're going to want to do that. There's actually two small pins in here, one on either side, basically to connect the two together. Mine have torn off because of course the moving that actually tore those actually off, but I'm okay with that, no big deal with kind of how it'll end up in the end. But if you like nice and clean and you left it together and pushed the whole thing through, you'll want to actually punch those pins out, and that will actually separate the two pieces here and you can disconnect them. So that's certainly the safer option than just kind of doing the twisting and pulling that I did earlier to separate the blade. The other thing that we actually have to do is you can also see that there is a pin holding the actual plastic blade to this first holder, and we're going to have to do the same thing there. We're going to have to take that and punch that through. Now we have to do that at a bit of an angle. Again, it's one of those through pins that go all the way through, so you're going to want to prop it up on something when you give it a tap so that it actually can go all the way through. So I'm just going to finish that off. We're giving it a couple of taps here and we'll finish that off camera. So I gave it a couple of whacks off camera. You can see it actually sticking out there. Again, one end has a little bit of a knurled edge on it, so that gives me something to grip on with the claw. And I can simply pull that out, and then the black sheath is going to come straight off of it. Next up is I want to remove the blade from the holder inside of this, because I need to get at the wires. I don't need to salvage anything of the blade, but I need to get at the wires. So again, it's one of those items that I can actually take a small bit. I've got a fairly small bit nail punch, prop it up on there, and I can give it some firm whacks with that to drive it back down. Okay? So that's what I'm trying to do. That one's not a through pin, so I don't have to worry too much about driving it back down, but I do have to make sure that I get it all the way past the plastic as well as this white plastic inside of that, so that it doesn't drag. And once I've done that, I'll be able to pull everything out. Might have to twist a little bit, that's what I kind of had to do off there, and then it'll basically come out, so you can see the whole blade comes off. Set that aside, and you can see what's inside of it. So you can see we've actually got this semi-translucent foam gasket that basically acts as a diffuser for a string of LEDs. Okay, so that's what we're replacing. We aren't going to need that one anymore. This black casing will simply come away. And so what I'm actually after is I'm trying to salvage what's inside of this. Is I need to clip all of the wires and also salvage, just trying to work it out here very carefully. You can see that what we have here is the clash sensor, this little circuit board, and so we need to clip all the wires as close as possible to the LED. So I'm just going to grab my wire clippers, and we are going to cut it off right at the LED circuit board. Same thing on the side that has the clash sensor, is make sure that I'm cutting that as close to the LED as possible, because I want to salvage as much wire as I can. Okay, so basically the LEDs and the blade are now toast. I can get rid of those. And you can see I've got this glued in fairly well, so I'm going to very carefully attempt to remove the clash sensor. Looks like a bunch of hot glue. And again, the coupling actually doesn't matter. What I was really after was the wiring. So I'm going to set that wiring aside because I need to keep it. And that's basically it for disassembly. So what should I have left over? I should still have the piece that has the circuit board and the quick connector. I should obviously still have my battery pack. and the screw-in pommel. I should still have my hilt along with the screwed-off emitter. And I should have the wiring that I salvaged from the blade, as well as a small baggie of parts related to the area around the switch. I'll also, for the moment, have a small piece of plastic tubing or housing that that the blade, pardon me, used to fit into, and I'm going to keep that around for just a little bit. And that's basically what I need. We're moving on to the next video. We will talk about assembly of the conversion.